Afternoon, everybody. My name is Bob Glenn. I'm Deputy Director here at DMF today. Thank you all for joining the spring SAP meeting. Before we get started here with opening remarks from Director McKernan, we just need to quickly do a roll call just to determine attendance here today. So I'm going to go through the list, and if you could just let me know if you're present, I'll check you off. So thank you. Steve Kirk.
Yes, sir.
Great. George Delaney.
Here.
Alex Hay.
Present.
Ron Bergstrom. Alan Renkerel. Amy Croto. Bill Doyle.
Here.
John Towns. Mike DeVasto. Seth Garfield. Dale Levitt.
Here.
Thanks, Dale. Jim Abbott. Renee Gagne.
Here.
Josh Reitzma.
Here.
Sean Bowen.
I'm here. Commissioner Randall may be coming. I don't believe she's here yet, but until she gets here, I can be her proxy.
Very good. Thank you. Either Commissioner Heupel or her proxy, Nate Corcoran.
Tay Evans here, also proxy.
Thank you, Tay. Welcome.
Thanks. Nice to see everybody.
Michael Moore.
Present.
Allison Brizius or her proxy, Tyler Solo. Jim Peters. Natalie Blaze.
Hi, Bob. I'm Jacob. I work for the Joint Committee on Agriculture and Fisheries on the House side. Natalie Blay has resigned, and we do not have a chair. We have an acting chair currently. And so for the time being, it's the House's belief that the House chair position for the committee is vacant. So I'm here, but basically just to tell everybody. So thank you.
Thanks, Jacob. Appreciate it. Senator Fernandez or proxy.
Oh, hi, everyone. My name is Matt Conley. I'm the legislative director. So I guess that makes me proxy.
Thank you, Matt. And lastly, Dan McKernan, you're here.
All right. Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, go for it, Dan.
So welcome everyone to today's meeting of the Shellfish Advisory Panel. Just as a little bit of background, and especially for the public who might be listening in, I just want to recall for the group that this was formerly an ad hoc informal group that met for over 5 years. And then we endeavored to prepare that Massachusetts Shellfish Initiative strategic plan. And one of the takeaways or one of the deliverables was for the legislature to make this a public body, as you know, embedded in Chapter 130. And we're really grateful for that. The purpose of this group is to exchange information between DMF and stakeholders and provide a public forum to advise DMF on emerging issues. So it's very much a conversation, and we appreciate all of you who are involved, not only in this meeting, but in the past meetings. Today is April 1st, and it's the budget season, and so we're anxiously awaiting the 2027 fiscal year budget to be completed. The House budget is usually completed by the end of April, and then the Senate takes another month for theirs. We don't have any indication yet of how the agency will make out, but we are hearing that it's likely going to be a very tight budget this year without much hope for increases, but you never know. So we're always hopeful. We also have a hiring freeze that's been enacted by the governor for about a year now. And so we're unable to replace any staff who retire or resign. We're pleased that our Shellfish program is pretty much fully staffed. But any new requests for us to do additional work over and above what we're doing now, will be challenging without additional resources. I also want to mention on a really good news part of the agenda, an event we had a couple weeks ago when the 2025 David Belding Award was given by our Marine Fisheries Advisory Commission to Henry Lind of Eastham. Henry is a well-known character in the world of shellfish in Massachusetts, especially in Cape Cod. The Belding Award's an annual award voted on by the commission, dates back to the early 90s, and it's given in the memory of sort of the founding father of DMF, David Belding, who published some really interesting treatises and descriptions of our fisheries, and also was the first marine biologist in the Commonwealth. Anyway, we gave it to Henry, well-deserved, great event. There were, because it was given as part of the Mass Shellfish Officers Association annual meeting, he had, almost 100 people there, friends and family. So a really, really great event. And I really want to thank the MSOA for hosting that and allowing us to give the award at that event. So it was a really great day. And Henry's been involved with with shellfish forever, probably about almost 60 years. But his most recent accomplishments were the MSOA training that is now being given at the Cape Cod Community College, and it's a hybrid format where there are parts of the course you can take online, the parts of the course are live, virtual, and parts of the course are in person. So it's a very modern approach, being spearheaded by Henry, who's in his 80s. So he's just that kind of an interesting and really great guy, very giving to the community. So those are my comments. Thank you for letting me kick off the meeting. Looking forward to the conversations today.
Thank you, Dan. That's great. So quickly, folks, just wanted to, before we move into looking at the November's minutes review and approval, I just wanted to quickly go over today's agenda with everybody. Did everyone have a chance to look at the agenda? We have a pretty packed agenda with a bunch of information today, which includes report backs from our two of our working groups. I'm going to give a brief presentation on some habitat restoration work that DMF is doing. Josh Rietzma is going to give an update on Green Crab Task Force program. Our DMF story read is going to talk about shellfish transaction cards. And then Renee is going to give us an update on MSOA. Then we have a fairly lengthy update of all the things going on at DMF, and then we'll wrap it up. Is everyone good with this agenda, or are there any modifications or suggested additions? Okay, well, seeing none, that looks good. Next, let's move on to the November meeting minutes to review. Has everyone had an opportunity to review? And if so, do you have any suggested changes? Okay, not seeing any. And Jared, I'm assuming I can just take this by unanimous consent, yes?
You cannot, Bob. This
I have to roll
requires a
call.
motion, a second, and a roll call vote of present attendees.
Okay, so I will entertain a motion to accept the November 2025 agenda
Motion to accept as presented.
minutes.
Seconded.
Thank you, Bill. Second by Dale. Very good. Okay, let's go through a roll call then. Steve Kirk,
Yes.
George Delaney,
Here.
Alex Hay,
Aye.
Bill Doyle,
Yes.
John Towns. Okay, we'll go move on. Dale Levitt,
Yes.
Renee,
Yes.
Josh Reitzma,
Yes.
Sean Bowen,
Yes.
Tay Evans,
Yes.
Michael Moore,
Yes.
Matthew.
Do you mean Matt Connolly?
Sorry, Conley. Yes, Matt Conley. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Matt.
it's a yes, thank you.
Thank you. And Dan. Okay. So then the motion carries. November minutes are accepted. Thank you very much. Okay, moving right along. Next, we up on the agenda, we have two updates from our two of our working groups. The first is Aquaculture License Transfer Group, and that's going to be an update from Dale Levitt. Dale, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Bob. So the license transfer working group has met recently on February 26th. And basically we continued the discussion on two primary efforts that the working group is doing, and we're sort of working on them simultaneously. The first is that we wanted to expand upon the survey of information on people's attitudes towards license transfers. A few years ago, we surveyed a number of aquaculture growers, shellfish growers, to get their feedback on the concept of license transfer. And we realized that we should probably look at some other stakeholders as well. So we're in the process of developing a survey that will go out to municipal employees and municipal officials. We have put together a draft survey that is under review by the committee and will be finalized sometime in the near future. And then we're going to, the Division of Marine Fisheries will set it out and send it out to the various municipal entities that are on the list. The second effort is probably our primary effort, and that's to generate a white paper on best practices for municipalities to transfer aquaculture licenses. And so, and this is a white paper, it's an advisory document only. So it is not going to have any kind of mandatory response to it. But really what we're trying to do is put together sort of the experiences of some of the more developed towns in terms of how they handle their license transfers, and then develop some best practices that then we could pass on to some of the more recent towns that are undergoing this kind of a discussion. And so as both the survey and the best practices paper develop, we'll be requesting members of the SAP to work with us to review those documents and help us get that information out. And so that, I'm not sure, Wayne, if we have scheduled another meeting coming up.
We do not have a date yet, but
Okay.
soon.
Thanks, Wayne. So that's sort of where we are with the license transfer committee.
Great, thanks, Dale. Any questions for Dale? Okay, I don't see any. So, okay, the next on the agenda is the Shellfish Hatchery Working Group. Wayne, can you elaborate who's going to give that update today?
Emma Beach Green was Green Beach from Martha's Vineyard was going to give the update, but I'm not sure if she's in attendance.
Okay. Yeah, I don't see her. All right, so I guess we should kind of just skip over that agenda item for now, and maybe we can catch up with Emma later on.
I could give a quick update, Bob, if that'd be useful.
That's great, Wayne. If you're up to speed, that would be great.
Good afternoon, everyone. Wayne Castaway, Regional Shellfish Program Lead for the Shellfish project as well as the SAP coordinator for the division. We met after a snowstorm cancellation in early March. So we met pretty recently with this work group, and we're really focusing on a few projects. One is we're conducting a survey of East Coast shellfish programs for all of the issues facing their hatchery sector, and we've completed those interviews and are currently compiling them all for the work group to help inform our hatchery sector and seed supply in Massachusetts. We're also working on a video project that is designed to educate primarily growers on proper seed handling and culture techniques for small shellfish. Again, we've identified that as a challenge in Massachusetts. So thinking a video might be the best way to help educate. And we're working on the storyboard or outline for that project now and going to take advantage of this spring's season and receipt season to capture footage and really put on tape some of those best practices we're hoping to convey to growers, primarily newer growers, although everyone can probably benefit from some refreshing techniques as well. So those are the two big projects we're working on currently, and like the prior group, we haven't set our next meeting date, but plan to do so soon. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions for Wayne? Okay, I don't think we're seeing any. Okay, excellent. Thank you. All right, Bradley, are you going to queue up the habitat restoration presentation, or do you want me to run it from my machine?
I can pull it up here.
Great. Oops.
Sorry, I think I'm having a challenge with this. Oh, could you see that?
It started to come up, Bradley, for a second, and then
Yeah, I'll give it a moment.
showing part of it. There we go.
Are you
All
seeing?
right. Yeah, it's up, slides up. Thank you, Bradley. All right. Well, thanks everybody. So today, what I'd like to talk to you about is some work that DMF is conducting right now on marine habitat restoration, with the concept of using nature-based solutions to promote marine biodiversity and healthy fish populations. And this is kind of DMF has worked on eelgrass restoration for the better part of 25 years, but on a smaller scale. And in recent years, in response to a couple of things, it's just one, a realization that to really make a dent in the issue that we have with eelgrass, we need to expand our efforts. But two, consistent with working on working with the Department of Fish and Game on the governor's biodiversity executive order team planning stages for that, where we're really embarking on ramping up our efforts as an agency to do some additional habitat restoration work. Next slide. And so just to set the stage, the challenge is that Massachusetts has among the most urbanized coastlines in the US. And over the last century, significant marine habitat loss has occurred. And this has been the result of a number of things, but including shoreline development, water quality degradation from a number of reasons, climate change. And as a result, we've seen some fairly substantial losses in some critical marine habitats in Massachusetts. And that includes an approximate 50% decline in eelgrass coverage just from the 1990s, approximately an 80% decline in our kelp forest, and greater than an 85 to 90% loss of natural oyster reefs in Massachusetts. Next slide. And so hold on one second. Okay, to build, so our goal here is to build Massachusetts' capacity for effective and durable marine habitat restoration by developing infrastructure, partnerships, and expertise needed to scale up restorations efforts for our eelgrass meadows, shellfish reefs, and kelp forests. And so really, the focus on here is really on developing capacity. Next slide. And our vision is to create a Massachusetts Marine Habitat Restoration Center. Many of you may be aware, in Salem, we have our Cat Cove Marine Lab. It's one of DMF's 3 facilities. We have about 6 full-time staff who report there, primarily staff who work on our policy program and also stock assessment. But also at that facility is a seawater lab that has, the potential to be a great opportunity for us to expand on some of our marine restoration work. And so the vision here is to, through this, DMF staff would provide technical support, applied research, and outreach. The facility would actually work to produce eelgrass seeds, kelp spores, and the potential to act as a oyster shell recycling site. And we have also on site, we have an 8-acre salt pond, which also has the opportunity to act as a living laboratory to test field methods and to educate restoration practitioners. Next slide. And so the question is why? Well, there's a lot of reasons why. And I mentioned at the beginning, one of the primary goals was enhancing biodiversity, consistent with the Healy administration's emphasis on the biodiversity executive order. And so, both terrestrial and in the marine environment, the United States and the world in general is suffering a biodiversity crisis, and we're seeing a reduction in a number of species and the abundance of species coast-wide in many cases. Another really important reason is to enhance fish production. These 3 habitat types, eelgrass meadows, kelp forests, and shellfish reefs, all provide essential fish habitat. And these really are the basis for nursery grounds for many of our commercially and recreationally important species that support our legacy fishing, both commercial and recreational fishing industries, as well as the blue economy in general. And then it has other ecosystem benefits like sequestering carbon, enhancing our ability to promote carbon sequestration and the ocean's capacity to absorb carbon. Similarly, to enhance water quality through nitrogen cycling. And also, these 3 habitat types are very good at attenuating waves and stabilizing shorelines so that they help enhance coastal resiliency. Next slide. So how are we going to do this? So first, through strategic investments, DMF received $1.5 million in capital improvement funds from the Department of Fish and Game to work on this project, and we're proceeding here. In addition to that, we're hopeful that additional funds will be allocated towards this work through the Mass Ready Act, which slates $20 million towards the Department of Fish and Game for biodiversity initiatives, including 5 million specific for marine habitat restoration. Another important aspect of this on the how is developing partnerships. And so DMF works with a host of NGOs, academic institutions, and other state and federal agencies on marine habitat restoration. And we need to build upon that and really expand. And a great example of this is, one of our partners is the Massachusetts Bay Natural Estuary Partnership, who recently contributed $80,000 in grant funding towards part of this project, which I'll elaborate on later. And then finally, the ultimate, the most important aspect of this is really building capacity and to be able to provide practitioners with materials and training for restoration, but also to conduct research on cutting edge restoration methods. Next slide. So here's a look at the facility, our Cat Cove Marine Lab. In the aerial view here, you can see the building on the right. You can see the building is centered in about a 6.2 acre outdoor campus and adjacent to an 8-acre coastal salt pond. Division Marine Fisheries owns the land completely surrounding the salt pond, and we have direct control over the tidal gates there. And in addition, it's a 5,200 square foot lab and an additional small 450 square foot waterfront laboratory that sits out on the dock there in the coastal salt pond. And so this is the facility that we're really working on enhancements and renovations to open up this habitat restoration center. Next slide. And so in part of the planning process, this particular facility was originally, I believe it was a NOAA fisheries facility. And then Division of Marine Fisheries essentially used this as their North Shore laboratory, starting, I believe, in the late 1960s. And we had a footprint there for quite a long time, I believe, till the 1990s. When we moved to Gloucester. And at that time, we turned the facility over to Salem State University. And Salem State invested a fair amount into a seawater system and aquaculture laboratory here and occupied that space basically up until, I believe it was 2020 or 2021 around COVID, when they had retracted and gave the facility basically back to us. And unfortunately, there's a lot of the maintenance required to keep the seawater systems up and running and fully functional had not been done. So it was suffering from a little bit of disrepair and needs a fair amount of work. And so one of our primary first focuses is enhancing the seawater system there. And so essentially with an eye towards designing and building infrastructure for shellfish, eelgrass, and kelp seed production. We also need to fix the tidal gate on Smith Pool and enhance security issues there because we've had some issues with local residents or kids mostly going in and messing with the tidal gates and in some cases draining the pond, which obviously we don't want to. That's where we get our water from. But also part of the vision here is to really enhance the outdoor space on the campus and use it as an opportunity for outreach with school groups, educators, and marine habitat restoration practitioners. And this could include things like informational kiosk on marine habitat around the campus, an interpretive classroom, and we'd also like to incorporate a touch take and some living display and some displays for the public. In addition to this, we'd like to be able to use Smith Pool as a sort of a living laboratory where we could use it for demonstration projects on various components of marine habitat restoration. Next slide. So there's a big team of us that I'm heading up at DMF who is working on this. Next slide. And just to give you a sense of where we are in the process, so excuse me. We've been working with the Department of Capital Asset Management to hire a master planner and a house doctor to oversee the construction, first the planning and then the build out of this. We've recently met with consultants to go over design elements, and they're working right now on engineering and mock-ups and cost estimates. In the interim, we're working on some immediate facility infrastructure needs we have with capital monies that we have in hand right now, and to try to get the facility ready for some of the upgrade work that'll be coming in the near future. We've also recently just hired on a contractor to come in and completely upgrade the seawater system, and that work should be starting imminently. And then finally, in the very near future, we're looking to initiate construction of an outdoor seawater pole barn to be used for eelgrass seed production. And I'll talk more about that in a second. Next slide, please. This is just a mock-up of replacement of the seawater system that we're going to use there. The one of the issues that we had is that the traditional seawater intake we had was only accessible by divers, and being able to maintain the intake and stop fouling was a consistent problem. And so with this new design, we'll have dual intakes that we can use sequentially and then drain out and dry out the opposite one intermittently to reduce fouling. And so that's part of the system. The map on the right is the bathymetry map of the salt pond. And long term, we're going to be looking to move the intakes to the deeper water area identified in the area just to the right of the facility here. Next slide. Talk a little bit about the outdoor seawater lab. So myself and some of our staff recently made a trip to visit a few other facilities on the East Coast, primarily down in Long Island Sound, who are doing this type of habitat restoration work. And that included the University of Connecticut's Avery Point campus, but also the Cornell University Cooperative Extension Unit on Long Island, who does a lot of eelgrass seed production work. And what we learned from that trip is that to really expand capacity sufficiently to scale up seed production, those two entities were using outdoor seawater lab space to really to expand their footprint, which similar to our situation is it's a fairly small, only 5,200 square foot seawater lab. We don't have a ton of indoor space to build out to that extent. So in this case, we're looking to utilize outdoor space. and the concept here is to use this pole barn, which is relatively inexpensive. It's easily, we can also use these IBC containers, which are cheap to get and easily modifiable and stackable. And as I mentioned before, this is a partnership with the Mass Bay's National Estuary Program. This past year, through this cooperative work with all of our partners, I believe we produced right around 1 million seeds for future propagation. Our goal for 2020, summer of 2026, is to ramp that up to 2 million seeds. And we're hoping to, by 2029, to get that up to 5 or 6 million seeds with the use of this outdoor seed barn. Next slide, please. One of the most important aspects of this, as I mentioned earlier, are partnerships. And this is just a sample of some of the partners we're working with on several of our different primary components here. Obviously, we've been at the eelgrass game for the longest, and so that's the most well developed. And you can see here we have a bunch of partners, and we're looking to continually expand that. But also on recently, when the oyster reef restoration, we've partnered with the Nature Conservancy, who's been excellent, and they were successful in getting a substantial grant from NRCS, which is going to work to fund a bunch of oyster reef restoration work that I'm going to touch on in a second. And then much more in its infancy is our kelp restoration work when partners with UMass Boston and Salem State. Next slide. Okay, so scaling up restoration. Well, it's a big job. We have a big coastline, and we have 3 habitat sites we're looking at. And one of the things, obviously, as a small agency, we can't do it alone. We need as many partnerships as possible. And so right now, I'm just going to touch base on a few of the projects that we're scaling up right now. Next slide. So I mentioned this oyster reef restoration work. This is a NRCS funded partnership with TNC. and the Cape Cod Conservation District to work on oyster reef restoration. This project is, I believe, it's in its first year. Through this funding, we were able to hire for the first time a shellfish restoration specialist who's working hand in hand with folks from TNC to get to do this. Next slide, please. In this most recent year, through this work, we developed an oyster restoration suitability model, and through this, using a multi-factor weighted model, looking at habitat things like logistics, feasibility, and community resources. We use that to identify sites, and with that, we've out of the gate we've identified 5 preliminary project areas, including the Westport River, Bass River, Waquoit / Popponesset Bay, excuse me, Upper Buzzards Bay, and Plum Island Sound as potential locations. Next slide. And for each project, the site selection process is driven by a lot of input with our municipal partners, with our DNR staff. In other words, we're not looking to go and set forth and start these projects in areas without direct consultation with the town. We want the towns who are really interested in partnering and taking, a supervisory role in these reefs and working with us and TNC on these projects. And the first one that we're working on permitting right now is to permit a 10-acre site in the Westport River. And that work is scheduled to hopefully to really ramp up this coming year. Next slide. So looking forward in the coming year for oyster reef work, our plans is to for the summer is to conduct a bunch of sonar surveys and recruitment studies and water quality monitoring to further refine our site selection process. We've also recently applied for a National Coastal Resilience Fund for oyster reef restoration to hopefully expand this work in Westport. And then we also have irons in the fire and collaborating with UMass Lowell on oyster reef research in Plum Island Sound, with Mass Maritime Academy on wild broodstock husbandry, working with the Mass Oyster Project on shell recycling, and then finally also working on some of those recruitment studies for potential sites with the Westport River Watershed Alliance and the Friends of Bass River. Next slide. Moving on to seagrass restoration. As I mentioned, we really want to build towards large-scale collaborative seagrass restoration. So essentially, be in a position to provide seeds for restoration, conduct research on restoration methods, and then most importantly, build a network of restoration practitioners who can work on this problem collectively across the state. Next slide. And the concept here is to, as I said, is to provide seeds for restoration work. This seeding methodology is a little bit of a pivot from some of the traditional work that DMF primarily focused on, which was on shoot propagation, which is very labor intensive and requires individual planting of shoots and has been, has only had moderate success, I guess, is how I would excuse me, how I would pose it for now. And what we've seen from looking at other regions, especially down in the Chesapeake, is they've had tremendous success with seeding and overseeding eelgrass areas to expand it. And we're modeling some of the successes seen in Chesapeake Bay, hoping them to apply them up here in Massachusetts with our partners. And again, with an eye towards and getting to a 2 million seed production planned for 2006 to be able to utilize those in the various seeding projects going on around the state. Next slide. And then the final component of that is working on research restoration methods. So I mentioned seeding, but there are other ones using some matting technologies, and I'm not the most up to our eelgrass team led by Dr. Forrest Schneck is the person who can give you the most detail on this. But in addition to looking at these different methodologies, we would like to be able to implement some of them actually in Smith Pool to use as a demonstration project, so that when we have folks come and visit, we can show them what some of these methods look like right up close and personal in the coastal lagoon that we have right there. Next slide. And then ultimately, through this work, by building these partnerships and training students and training volunteer groups to work in it, we really just want to focus on building a network of restoration practitioners with the understanding that we need this bigger network of folks to be able to pull off restoration on a scale that's meaningful. Next. And then for this coming year, other irons in the fire that we have, we're a whole bunch of stuff going on with working with the Mass-based National Ushering Program to build the seagrass barn at Cat Cove over the next 2 years. We have a joint program with MIT and Hui to explore novel seagrass seed propagation methods in Smith Pool at Cat Cove. Working with Salem State to bring on undergraduate summer internships supporting our seed-based restoration work at Cat Cove. And then we've also applied for a substantial grant with several partners, including Northeastern University and UMass Boston for the Allen Family Foundation. And this program would support DMF seed collection, bring on full-time seagrass restoration technician and seasonal research assistants to work with us, and hopefully, utilize our leverage our expertise and resources of the academic partners to do additional genetic and microbial techniques to inform seed-based seagrass restoration practices. And so we're hopeful, and with that coming on board, if we get the grant from the Allen Foundation, again, our goal is to get upwards of 5 to 6 million seeds by 2029. Next slide. And then very briefly, just this is the last slide. I appreciate your patience. Talking quickly about some kelp restoration work and relative to eelgrass and or oyster reef restoration. This type of work is relatively in its infancy, but we're fortunate to have some regional partners who are expert in kelp, and two of them, Dr. Jarrett Burns at UMass Boston and Dr. Lindsay Green-Javalis at Salem State. And we've recently partnered with them by hiring them to do some additional work on kelp. The first is we've hired UMass Boston to use optical remote sensing and AI to map kelp forests in Salem Sound. And this is a kind of a proof of concept pilot effort that if we can utilize it, we'd hope to apply it on a broader scale. And relative to kelp rest or any kind of restoration, before you can restore, you need to know what the extent of that habitat type is. And so we're really in need of being able to map this type of habitat throughout Massachusetts. And then the second aspect of it, working with our partners at Salem State, is trying to build a small scale demonstration kelp hatchery at Cat Cove. And part of this will be conducting research on kelp recruitment success and evaluating the efficacy of certain planting methodologies like green gravel, and with an eye towards developing a pilot kelp restoration program by 2028. And so with that, I'll take any questions. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, just wondering about the culture. Are you using culching for the oyster restoration stuff, like straight shell, and how that permitting is working?
So yeah, to answer your question, and well, first I'm going to speak briefly to it because our expert on this, Sean Terrell, is not on the call. But I will talk. Yes, we are looking at putting culch in some of those areas relative to in the Westport site relative to permitting. Our division, along with the Department of Fish and Game, is currently working with our colleagues at DEP to look at the potential for permit streamlining relative to culching activities. And we're currently working back and forth on them with that, and hoping to have some a productive meeting on that topic fairly soon, and can hopefully later be report back to you on progress on that. But we understand that we're trying to make culching, the process of getting the permits necessary to conduct culching, a little more streamlined, and we're working towards that end.
Okay, and maybe that could apply to the towns as well if we find a
Well, that I think
streamlined
that yeah, that
process.
would be the goal. That would be the goal, Mike, is to be set up a process where the permitting is more streamlined, and DMF potentially would have a role in working with the towns to approve that. But again, it's early in those discussions, so I don't really want to go too deep into the details at this point.
Okay, thanks.
Alex.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I think I'm super impressed that the division has taken the initiative to go down this road and maybe not be proactive, proactive on some stance, but I think it's super important. Looking forward, I see that you've got 750 earmarked for a couple of years. What does the budgeting, hope look like, or constraints look like in the years following that? I mean, I can imagine the numbers are going to be, to do significant work, is going to add up. What does it look like for the future?
Right, and that's a great question. And so, as I mentioned before, we're right now, the Governor Healy has introduced the Mast Ready Act, and within that, is $20 million to advance biodiversity goals, of which 5 million is specifically set aside for marine habitat restoration. So we're hopeful that, if that passes and moves forward, that will one help us complete this particular project, but then also act as a seeding fund, pun intended, to be able to again build more capacity, bring on more partners, and do additional work. And
Yeah.
that's the short term hope. Longer term, we're hoping that by building this network of practitioners and by building this capacity, will be an attractive site to be able to compete for nationally available habitat restoration grants. As I mentioned, there's several we're already applying for, but we're hoping to expand that, and we're hoping we can leverage both our facility and our expertise to be able to make that an attractive option.
Yeah, that was kind of where I was leading with that. Is so the end game maybe is to look at a federal NOAA trade-off at the end of this program. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Cool.
Any other questions? Steve?
Yeah, thanks. Just super quick comment to applaud the division in advancing this work, going from, sort of like permit review in some respects and some of these habitat types to, the leader. It's amazing. So thanks for the commitment.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. Hey, not seeing any other questions. All right, Bradley, could you flash the agenda back up on the screen? Okay, I believe next on the agenda is getting a report back on green crab task force and depletion program expansion. I believe Josh, you're on the hook to give us an update on that.
Sure, happy to give a quick update. So yeah, Josh Reitzma, Cooperative Extension and Hui Sea Grant. I'm here mostly to represent the expansion of green crab trapping interests to Cape Cod. As many of you well know, for the last 10 years or so, DMF has helped the municipalities up on the North Shore and the Great Marsh area trap green crabs to help, with shellfish populations there, and in large part with earmark sponsored by Senator Tarr. And Cape Cod has seen an explosion, so to speak, in green crabs, especially in Cape Cod Bay. So there was a lot of municipal interest in doing something about that to try to mitigate green crabs and promote better shellfish propagation and enhancement. So thanks to Representative Luddy, an earmark was put in for fiscal year 26 and was funded. And when we were made aware of the funding this winter, we worked with Wayne to arrange for a meeting of the Barnstable County Shellfish Advisory Group, which is basically all the constables on Cape Cod. And we discussed this funding and how it might best be used. You know, there's a lot of interest in using it as a bounty program like the North Shore has, but with logistical challenges and getting that set up and spent by June 30th. The towns opted for a different approach in terms of gearing up some capacity with trapping and freezer space for bait for green crab trapping, and then also sort of looking at if there were no markets to get rid of the crabs, what would we do with them here on the Cape specifically? So looking at some of the composting and other aspects to disposal of green crabs if, you know, as a disposal method of last resort if there were no markets. So that is the sort of general focus of the green crab effort on the Cape. And I know there's a larger effort statewide. There's a task force working on sort of market development and all these other aspects of green crabs that many of you are well aware of. But we're very thankful for the state support in sort of looking at green crabs on the Cape more specifically and how we might sort of get at this predator management strategy. And you can see there the 8 towns that are participating and trying to sort of gear something up for longer term green crab management in Cape Cod waters. So I think that's it for my update. If I missed anything, Wayne, feel free to jump in.
Thanks, Josh. Any questions for Josh? So I'll ask a quick question to Josh or Wayne. I mean, obviously, 25,000 is a start, but it's not a lot to cover the number of towns that are on the Cape. And so, what are the discussions around trying to increase the funding for the Cape towns to promote this program?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the discussions in the State House have been going on, but I know that Representative Luddy has been actively pursuing this for fiscal year 27 as well currently. I don't know what she's thinking about for funding. And we're in a spot where we can't sort of advocate for it, but yes, there's definitely a lot of discussion about extending the funding.
Thanks, Josh. Anybody else? Okay, great. Well, you guys are keeping me on time on this agenda. Very well. Okay, next up is Story. Story is going to talk about shellfish transaction cards.
Thanks, Bob. So I'll give a brief update and then maybe we can get some feedback from the dealers on the call. As we discussed, and as you know from your previous meeting, this embossed swipe card technology that we've used for really decades on our shellfish transaction card, that technology is obsolete and we can no longer produce those cards or even replace that machine. So, here we are for 2026. DMF has essentially said, you don't need the embossed card for 2026, and in its place, just either carry your paper permit or an image of it on your phone, and you can use that with your picture ID, your government issued ID. And we're looking towards 27 for a new solution. So I think we've already talked here about some of the different possibilities, and since your last meeting in the fall, we've been meeting internally and with DPH and with folks in the industry about what that might look like. So, we're still taking feedback on that and interested in it. If we go to the next slide, one thing that we have talked about in the past few months is how to use technology to maybe help with the situation. And one idea was to put a QR code on the paper permit that could be used to be scanned by an environmental police officer or a dealer to get the permit information. And so we've actually just gone ahead and done that because we had some developer time at the state. So starting later this week, I believe any permit that's commercial permit that's printed going forward will have that QR code. And when you scan it, you'll get information like permit type, permit year, permit holder name, permit number, the endorsements they have, including Shellfish, and vessel info. And then additionally, that information after a scan could be ingested by a third-party software system on the dealer side if dealers are using that type of technology and they're, the company they're using has the wherewithal to set that up on that end. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And that'll be available on all permits, not just those with Shellfish. So, because we had the opportunity, we just went ahead and did that. So that's kind of the first update we've done. But we're interested, that's the update we have, and we're really interested in feedback, Alex, any other dealers on the call about, how things have been going so far and based on that, what would be helpful in the future.
Honestly, th things have been going pretty smooth, as kind of expected. I think, during our kind of subcommittee meetings there, I think we kind of came to the conclusion that we were kind of maybe overthinking this a lot. At the end of the day, a lot of the dealers are seeing the same farmers, harvesters day in and day out. So it's not like you have this mad rush of people that you don't know. That is by far having the random person is by far not the norm in this situation. Um, I think adding the QR code is great. I think it'll help those that want to have advanced software to kind of speed receiving up. But at the end of the day, I'm looking at this thing about like law enforcement's, well, that information's already on their permit. They have all it's written in English, just like it would be, for our hunting permits and fishing recreational permits, we have all that information on a piece of paper, and that's the way we've been doing it for a long time. Um, it seems to be going fine. I don't see, you know, uh, frankly, we don't get, the if the green police come in and look at swipes, they're really not looking for the embossed print on those things. It's only on a trace back that DPH really like, scrutinizes that thing. I think the issue here is going to be with DPH and what they're happy with at the end of the day is, and what we've been kind of talking about. So it's been working fine, you know.
Great. Okay. Thanks for the feedback. George?
Yeah, hi, George Delaney, Ipswich Maritime. I would agree with Alex full fold. And like he said, our transactions are, for us anyways, I can't speak for everybody, but they're very, very limited, right? There's only so many people that are out there harvesting, at least in our neck of the woods. This how we've been doing it now works fine. If you've already gone and added the QR code. I guess that's we don't have the technology in place right now to sort of streamline that and skip a step, but maybe some do, and it's beneficial. But this paper trail of the that we're doing now works just fine. We've had no bumps in the road or any issues whatsoever, right? But to Alex's point, we don't see a lot of new people either. I don't. These are the same people we've dealt with for years and years and years. In fact, we just threw our hat back in the ring locally in Ipswich, and they're guys we've known forever, and just started dealing with again. So it's nice to make sure they have a active license and not just people we know. But I guess the QR code for us, my only concern would be is the quality of the data behind it, right? Like how updated is when our buyer scans this code, are we going to know right away that this guy's had his license revoked? Or I guess the QR code adds a little bit for people not for fraud or trying to, hide their identity. But if it's not directly connected to something that tells us right now that the guy doesn't have an active license, then I don't know what the QR code's adding, I guess is
Yeah.
like,
And
what's
it
the
is,
benefit of the QR code, I guess, besides the opportunity for a dealer to streamline?
I think that's the biggest opportunity. But to your question, it does not, the way it's currently set up, it does not get at the status in real time. It's similar. It's the same information that would have been printed on the permit or
Right.
last year on the card, right? It's a snapshot in time. So that's a good question. Mike?
Yeah, just from the grower side, I mean, it's spring, it's fine. They're paper, but often we're not working in the driest environment. And even at the end of the year, my transaction card is usually broken and whatever and delaminated. So the durability, we've made some copies of ours, but that means there's copies in each truck, and I don't know if that's a big deal, whatever. But just switching from a situation where our employees had their separate transaction cards with our number on them, some of those people might have their own transaction card, making sure that those slips actually end up um, corresponding to the right person at the right, when these are traced back and not coming from maybe an employee who has their own, uh, wild harvesting permit or something like that. I think there's some issues that still really need to be considered about using, just a paper situation and not having any kind of scan. And then, going down the road, I don't know if we're expected to show this every time we deliver to the same dealer, or do they just need to have it on file? And they know me and I can just read out my number to them while they sign the thing, or am I going to have to show this piece of paper when it's, sideways rain and whatever? And these things more come into play really when, we always had to run them because they'd swipe them. But if the EPO come or whatever, and you haven't been doing that because there's no more swiping, and you've got your permit in a separate truck or the permit's just totally destroyed or whatever, those things may become issues. So I just definitely err on the side of like figuring out a durable solution pretty quickly. Um, and one where we know that the given transaction card, because like some people are the same guy, but some of us have like three employees that have transaction cards that are coming, and they are selling under our number. And then in Wellfleet, you have also situations where people are working for a farm, but also wild harvesting on the side with a separate card with a separate transaction number. So they're just things to think about. I mean, I think right now there's not a lot of sales going on at spring. As things heat up and the season gets going and there's growth out in the wild and there's a lot of stuff coming in, I think these things could become issues.
Okay. Thank you.
And one more quick question. Was it looked into whether these could just be like, um, whether these cards could be printed by a third party, like somebody that prints credit cards or whatever? Because I still get embossed like like those credit card offers in the mail. So there must be third party companies that can print a name and number unique to the card. Um,
Yeah. We haven't had much success finding a solution to the embossed side.
okay.
But we'll look, we got the comments and I hear durable and we'll keep looking into that, Mike. Uh, Alex and
Yeah,
then Anna.
I just wanted to circle back real quick. To Mike's previous point, I think the question should be asked before, like really dug into, like, do we really need a card? Like, do we really need that identification? If the paper is an issue, like if we have a recognized dealer, a vendor at the shop, then, it is what it is. That the vendors is there, it's the same person. I don't, at some point, you don't need this from a DMF standpoint, I believe. Again, I think it goes back to like, what is DPH going to want to see for this trace back if it really is this, that person. I mean, it comes back to them, and then, where does it fit in the model ordinance about receiving shellfish? How does that tie into that? So,
Right.
I think it really needs to be examined pretty closely about like how much do we actually need to have a physical permit on that person when they land, you know?
Got it. Anna?
I have a follow-up question for Mike. So when we're talking about a harvester who might have their own wild harvest permit as well as work for a company, how was that handled differently when there were cards? Or was it also a problem then and we just are it's just the same problem in a different format, or is there something specific to the paper versus the card that changed that method?
Mike, you're muted.
I think it's the same problem, but it's more so like the cards that are farm cards, say Field Point Oyster Farm, then the
Yep.
employee's name, then the transaction number and their employee are not our transaction, our ID, and then the employee ID.
Yep.
And that every time you run that card, it's ensured that that is logged under those transaction numbers. Whereas if
Yeah.
you're not showing the paper permit every time, and then somebody's just writing down, oh, that guy delivers for Field Point Oyster Farm,
Good point.
but
Yeah.
this time he's coming in and selling his own product. Whoever's receiving that needs to make sure that just because they know that person from the farm, that they're logging that transaction under the right either
Yeah.
farm or individual permit number,
Yeah.
basically.
One other just note that I know Story mentioned that the QR code will also be releasing this week, but on top of that, the parent permit or the commercial permit associated with those employee permits will also now be printing on the paper version of the employee permit. So we realized that that was a gap that was missing, so the parent permits were no longer available to the dealer if they were looking at a permit. So that is also a change that's coming. Yeah, and I just realized also that that information is not in the QR code, but I will add it.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Mike. Michael Moore, DPH, is there anything to add from your side that I might have missed?
I just lost my screen after I tried to unmute. Yes, this is all great feedback. I mean, just for some little background, Division of Food Protection has actually two big regulations that we enforce. There's a retail code, which is used by local boards of health to inspect the 50,000 or so retail establishments, and we're in the process of rewriting that right now. That was the highest priority reg that was given to us by the Commissioner's office about a year or so ago. We're still working on that. The next reg, the wholesale regulation, what used to be called the big reg, in addition to fish and shellfish, also regulates meat and poultry and milk, cheese, frozen desserts, bottled water, residential kitchens. And that was upgraded in 2016. And all those industries have changed, not only shellfish, not even fisheries, but we're going to re-examine that wholesale reg to say, okay, what's changed in the last 10 years that we need to change the code? And this is a good example, a technology that was great 10, 15 years ago. Credit cards, I remember swiping them myself when I volunteered for stuff. But technology changes. And when the code does and what's good is this organization is not replicated in the other programs. There is no meat and poultry advisory panel or a bottled water group that gives guidance like all of you do. So, we'll try to come up with, as we draft and change the regulation, we'll be aware that technology could keep changing. So we don't want to replace a DPH code that says you must have a card and swipe it on Shellfish transaction slips and replace that with you must have a QR code. It's like, how do we work on a requirement that meets the needs of DPH and DMF and some of our federal requirements, but also understands that the technology is going to change over time, and we need to. Now that's the long term. That's the long-term thing over the next couple of years. Eric Hickey, who couldn't be here today, is working with DMF and our inspectors to make sure we get people through the current Vibrio control season. So we need to keep track of records and do tracebacks, but we understand, this section of the code that requires transaction slips might cause a speed bump, but we're going to work on that to try to help people get through the season without getting debited for maybe having a broken card that they can't replace, for example. But we'll get you through it.
Thanks, Mike. George?
So if there's a QR code on this paperwork already, like you guys have proactively done, we haven't lost anything, right? I mean, our harvester, we have a lot of confidence in our harvesters, and they know they need that when they come up, and they take good care of it. But even if they didn't, can't they have like a picture of it on their phone? Isn't that as durable? I mean, even I don't think we need these cards, guys, is all I'm saying. I think I love the QR code idea, and I think if they can just take a picture of it, then even if it gets destroyed or blows away and they have to get another one or take some copies, I feel like we're still right where we were with the card system. So
Thanks, Mike.
I just wasn't sure if Mike Moore was talking about eliminating the need for the transaction slips, because I know for us on our part, that's our receipt that we drop something off, and that's our receipt that we're using that to some people. That's their basic logging mechanism for their harvest, because oftentimes you're delivering a certain amount, you might wind up selling in 3 or 4 more bags than whatever. It doesn't matter. It is definitely a function of shell fisherman accounting.
No, I can answer that. I don't want to intend to. I'm not proposing a regulation that makes it difficult for anybody to operate a business or puts an additional burden on. So in every regulatory change and looking at the big reg, what are the public health needs for tracing, doing trace forward of records, and how is that accomplished? How can businesses still have receipts and maintain those receipts and maybe not. I mean, we have so much stuff online nowadays. I get worried about some information violating the public, well, not violating the public records, but the proprietary rights of businesses. If you have so much information that we collect, what is like your customer list? That's proprietary. Why would that be needed to be shared on record at all times in DPH? That's a question where we look at going forward, what's too much information, but what's enough information to do disease investigations, trace back, stuff like that. And as we draft these regulations, first there's an internal review, but then it comes out for public comment. And then there's this where people get to look at it and say, wait a minute, you missed something, you need to address these issues. So eventually that big reg will come out and you'll all get to comment and look at it. And you're more than welcome right now to look at the current code. That is a public document. That's 105 CMR 500, and point to any friction points. That's a feedback. We're doing that with the other industries that regulate, saying what's in the current code that seems to be a problem. We also look at citations that have been issued by staff on inspection reports going back. We got 12 years of data for all these industries, and what's the problem areas that need to be either scaled back a little bit or examined and enforced a little differently. So we'll keep that. And I'm going to keep coming back to these SAPs. So believe me, there'll be more of these meetings before there's a draft regulation. So I'll be listening to any of your comments and folding them into our draft reg once we start working on it. Eric will also.
Okay, Bob, I'm good unless
All
there's
right.
any other comments.
No, I think that's good. Thanks for
That's
leaving that
helpful.
discussion story. We should get rolling on the agenda here to stay on track. Thank you.
Yep. You're welcome.
Okay. Next up, we have an MSOA update. Renee, you're on the hook.
Hi, Renee Gagne, Shellfish Constable for the town of Chatham, and I've been asked to give the MSOA update. First is the training course. I think I've given an update on every single one of our meetings over the last few years. Dan did this a little more succinctly than I'm going to do. So we're happy to report that the session is about halfway through. This is the first time that we've had this hybrid course. To review. The course is being facilitated through 4Cs and headed by Professor Catherine Edders, who's pretty much taken over putting the course together and again facilitating the in-person aspects. So as Dan mentioned, it is a hybrid course. We have 3 in-person days. The first day was a housekeeping and how to navigate the 4C's website. And then we had our in-person labs. And thank you, Dale Levitt ran the Shellfish Biology Lab, and then the folks from DMF did the HAB Lab. And it was a great way to kick off the whole session. Because it was fun. I mean, people were dissecting animals and looking under microscopes. So it was a great way to kick it off. But the professionalism of the presentations we're getting are just over the top. And I really most of the presentations are coming from DMF. So I really want to give kudos to Matt Camisa, because he really rallied everybody over at DMF. Made sure that they got all their presentations in on time. We were asked to put a couple of prompts in or questions for our presentations, and so that the students taking the course would be able to participate on kind of an online discussion board with their other students. And the way the online courses are handled, there's like a theme for a week, and then there's a number of presentations under that. Like this week was habitat. So it's really the whole gamut. It's not just the authority, rules, and regulations. It's how to deal with the public, how shellfish constables have to interact with conservation commissions. It really gives them, their basic tools at doing their jobs at the local level. So our second in-person course was primarily MEP. They requested that they have all of their presentations in person. They didn't want anything recorded. And again, that went smoothly. Sergeant Vinyl orchestrated all of his folks, and like I said, it went very smoothly. And the third in-person day will be the last day of the course, and it's a whole new concept of a final exam. Each student has picked a topic already, and they're putting together, whether it be a PowerPoint presentation, a video, or whatever, focused on whatever topic that they have chosen. So it's a new way of educating, and we're feeling really happy with the results. I mean, I'm sure we're going to be having a hindsight vision at the end, and hopefully that will help us keep the course on track, keep it present, and find ways that we can just make it better to offer the next round. We have 35 students currently taking the course, all of which, except for one, have positions. And so they were required to have this course, so it was very timely. With all of these presentations recorded, it'll be easier for us to have another semester when we can. And hopefully the next step will also using the same type of format to have some more, to have extra education for constables that are already in the position. Again, to update them on progress in different aspects of our industry. So anyway, you know, a lot of big thank yous out there because we had a whole lot of agencies represented. Like I said, primarily DMF, but we had DPH, we had DEP, we had CZM, and especially a big shout out for the County Extension Program, Josh and his people, especially Rachel, because they've been there in the background, and Rachel has been up in front and orchestrating the whole course with the rest of us. Again, we're halfway through, and we'll have another update when we close session. Second is on the agenda is a leadership transition. So we had our MSOA annual convention on March 19th. We have our annual business meeting at that same time, and that's when we have elections. So Dave DeCanto has been our president for many years. He's retired and stepped down. So yours truly is now the president. I was the vice president prior, so it was just an easy step up. And the vice president now is Ryan Birch from Brewster, who I also want to shout out that he won our Constable of the Year award, and we'll be bringing that presentation to his select board, I believe, in May. And then Amy has her current position as recording secretary, and Donovan on the island is our secretary and treasurer. We also have two board of director members. They were nominated from the floor at the meeting and elected. And we have Stephanie from Harwich. She's a new Shellfish constable. And also Rebecca Visnick from Gloucester. And we're really happy to get more participation from the North Shore. And we have a lot of new members, a lot of new vibrancy in the organization. So it's really great to have these folks on board with a lot of young enthusiasm. Next on the agenda is Constable Authority. I'm sure most of you know that Shellfish constables derive their authority from Chapter 130, Mass General Laws, but specifically Section 98. And we've talked about this for very, very long, but the language in 98 is almost obsolete. For instance, the language describing the constable course is still located at the Mass Maritime. So, and with new posts, criteria, it may change some of Shellfish Constable's authority. So, and there's also a lot of question from our own membership that want some clarity on some of the authority that's outlined in 98. So that's our next priority as far as MSOA is to kind of sit down. We'll sit down with DMF as well, but putting together some recommendations that would certainly help us kind of make more concrete what exactly our limitations are, what exactly our authority is, and also clarify the certification process for constable. Currently, it's not mandatory that new constables are actually certified, but most towns have a criteria when their people are hired that they take this course, get certified whenever that the course is next given. So it may be an opportunity for us to actually codify that and make that a mandatory requirement. I think it would add personally a little professionalism to Shellfish constables, but that's something to be discussed. So a revision of that language, or certainly recommendations from MSOA, is going to be next on our list. But once we come up with those recommendations, this might be a perfect opportunity to bring to the Shellfish Advisory Panel, maybe have a subcommittee on this, because it will need to be sponsored to the legislature, and this is probably the most appropriate place to be able to foster that. So I'm going pretty fast here. The next on the agenda, the recreational harvesting statistics. I don't really have too much of that. This is in Dave DeCanto's wheelhouse. He's speaking with some kind of developers, database developers. Capturing recreational harvest has always been something that we have wanted to do. I know that the state wants to do it, but it's very important for us as local managers as well. It's really I think we all have our own way of articulating to our powers that be how important recreational harvest is, and we always try to put that into a monetary way to help us with our own budgetary needs. So if there was something that was more consistent, that was shared across different municipalities, that could actually show, the state and DMF how important recreational harvesting is. We all live in coastal communities. People come here this is their people's playgrounds. And one of the things that we have uniquely get to offer the people is the opportunity to participate in a really family oriented way, how the diversity and the uniqueness of our coastal area. So it's really important that we figure out a way on how to articulate that, and the best way to articulate that to the powers that be is putting a dollar sign in front of it. So hopefully we'll be able to actually find a way that is replicable across communities, and someplace that a way that really identifies. I mean, most of our discussions here are about commercial, and that's really important. But most of our time in the summertime is really dealing with that really uptick in family harvesting, and people love it. That's what a big part of of why people come here. So with that, I'll take any questions, and that's it for our update. Go ahead, Steve.
Hey, thanks a lot, Renee. Do you have to record, I assume, like via your propagation permit, like where you're planting for rec or commercial enhancement, the numbers that you take delivery from a hatchery? Like, is that information captured sort of only in your propagation permit? Do you keep records? Do other towns keep records? Are there any of that available? So I think the harvest piece is really important. I would just like put a big second on it. That's a real interest. And, I think to sort of go full circle to see what the towns are investing in, what they're buying, at what stage and where they're planting, and then what's coming out.
Well, I can only really speak for what we do. We're a little, we're a little ethnocentric in the way we do things here. But we have to keep track, certainly, of how much we buy, where we plant. But for us, because we mostly have a wild fishery, it goes everywhere. So everybody is, it's accessible to everybody except within our recreation only area. And anybody who has any kind of a shellfishery has to designate a certain area for recreational harvest only. And we do keep track of where we grow things and where we put things. All of it's a rough science. But we definitely do keep track of how much we put in, and on our end, I may have one right here. We have little catch reports that I have my deputies fill out every single day, what they see at that time. So it's really a picture of what's happening at that time. So that's really how we base our catch, and especially for our recreational folks, we have somebody at our recreational area at every time, at every tide, and every 7 days a week. So we have a good picture, but recreational folks can go anywhere in our town. So other towns are different. Like they have Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you can go in this area. That's it. but in Chatham, they can go anywhere. So it's a little more difficult to get a really good idea.
Yeah, thanks for that. Might be interesting to like poll the MSOA membership on how the different towns are collecting that information and what happens to it.
Any other questions for Renee? Okay, not seeing any. Thank you very much, Renee. Great update. Okay, next up is some DMF updates from our Shellfish program. We're going to go a little bit out of order as to what's on the actual agenda, just to help with the flow. But I'm going to turn that over to Wayne Cassigway right now, who is going to lead us off. Thanks, Wayne.
Thanks, Bob, and thanks everyone again for listening. Can folks hear me okay? I was having a mic problem. Great. So we're going to do a little fast-paced DMF update here and hopefully stay on track here with regard to the time frame. I'm going to kick off a few of the topics and then turn it over to my colleagues here shown on the slide who will present on individual topics. Next slide. So one of the big things we do here at DMF every year, and we report to the SAP, is our audit season and schedule with the FDA. As everybody knows, the FDA comes to Massachusetts every year and audits all the different entities that are part of the Shellfish Control Authority. Here in Massachusetts, it's us, DMF, also MEP, as well as DPH. All of us get audited by FDA as to us following the NSSP requirements. This is the big one for DMF here, the PEER, which is an acronym for Program Element Evaluation Review. And every year they pick a percentage of our designated growing areas to audit, and we typically engage with the local constables and other local stakeholders and physically look at all of these areas on site. We take boat rides, but most importantly, they review all of our records for compliance. This is the planned schedule for this year. This year's PEER will be in early August, and so for those of you on the meeting and can see your towns and areas here, we'd love to have you participate. I'd love to point out PKD Bay in particular, which is an acronym for Plymouth, Kingston, and Duxbury Bay. It's one complex, one of our most important shellfish areas in Massachusetts. And as you've been hearing at the SAP, there's been a lot of emerging issues with the FDA and DMF, and PKD really encapsulate all of them. So this is going to be a big one for us at DMF. As you all heard last year, we had a big Vibrio challenge in PKD last year, so FDA is certainly going to be looking at that. Also, it's a big area for moorings and certainly aquaculture. It's our second biggest aquaculture embayment in the state. And so all of those emergent issues we think are going to be looked at with FDA. So we're really gearing up for that one as well as others. Next slide. We typically provide an update on NESA and ISSC at every meeting. The first bullet here about the ISSC, typically it occurs every other year, and you've been hearing from us ad nauseum that it's really challenging with the budget situation at the federal government, particularly with the new administration and all of the shutdowns and the critical need for FDA to be able to participate in the ISSC. We've really had a tough time scheduling the meeting, and we're way overdue. But I'm pleased to report that it looks solid for finally January of 2027 for the biennial meeting to take place. We've been really looking forward to this because there's a real logjam of issues that need to get approved by the ISSC. So those of us in the program have been really looking forward to finally nailing this down. Unfortunately, I can't share the location because it hasn't been finalized yet, but hopefully we'll hear about the location very soon. And again, for SAP members, this is a real great opportunity if the ISC comes locally to participate in all of the rules governing the entire shellfish industry. The next item, NESA, which is an acronym from Northeast Shellfish Sanitation Association. I really encourage all SAP members to attend these, particularly when they're within driving shot of Massachusetts. NESA includes all of the states from New Jersey to Maine. This year's meeting is in Freeport, Maine, so it's really within driving distance of many of us. And again, just really encourage folks to participate. It's a great agenda. It's 2 days, 2 full days. And on the slide, some of the topics of note that we've been talking about here at the panel for many months and years. Some of the big issues such as birds on gear, restoration, pump outs, biotoxins, and of course, a lot of presentations from the ISSC and FDA. Please reach out to DMF for details on this program and hope to see many of you there. Next slide. For the last couple of years, at least, we've been reporting on the depuration fishery and really the real sea change that's been happening with this fishery ever since the November of 2023 coastal storm took out our plant on Plum Island. We've been looking at options, we've been conducting studies and keeping this group intimately informed and work with many of you behind the scenes on the future of this fishery. Since our last meeting in November, we finally made the decision to close our facility on Plum Island after 100 years permanently in December. So it was a real big decision-making point for DMF. Thankfully, as you've heard, though, we've been working with a nearby plant at Spinney Creek in Elliott, Maine, which, if you stay on Route 95, is only an initial 20-minute drive for harvesters. And we worked out a pilot MOU last year, which we reported on. Again, the NSSP requires an MOU between all entities to transport contaminated shellfish across state lines. And I'm pleased to report we did an audit about a month or two ago on the pilot, and we really did pretty well, and it really went well. And now we're looking to make it permanent. So we're really excited about that. I'm pleased to report last year, the full year of the program under that MOU, we processed 145,000 pounds of softshell clams from Massachusetts at Spinney Creek. Why I use the term pleased is that harvest actually equated the last full year of harvest and throughput at our own plant on Plum Island. So we're really up to full production as of today that we were before our plant was shut down. Little caveat though, I'd love to share with that though is all of that harvest came from one growing area, and that was the Merrimack River area N2. So all of the other areas shown on the slide here, the Pines River and Saugus and Revere, and then all of the areas in Greater Boston Harbor, which historically have been the source of most of our restricted area harvest, did not participate at all. Due to the closure of our plant, a lot of the master diggers and subordinate diggers in all those other areas chose to retire rather than participate in this new program, which was really unfortunate. A lot of shellfish really is left out in the environment and not participating in the industry. So although we equaled our overall throughput, it really only came from the Merrimack River. So we're really actively working to try to recruit new master diggers and subordinates, as well as increase the geographic ability of the Merrimack crew to expand into other areas. So those conversations are happening and hope to expand the geographic participation in this fishery. But again, the fishery is alive and well and going forward. Next slide. As we do every spring at the SAP, we present on the last few years of commercial landings and shellfish. A lot to absorb on this slide, so I don't expect folks to dive right in here. And our statistics program just produced these numbers in the last couple of days because of the lag time. But we do have the preliminary harvest, unaudited harvest from some of these species for last year. And I'll just touch on a few highlights. Bay scallop, very variable. It's very typically variable. It always has been a variable fishery. So I would say it was an average year for scallops. Blue mussels, we can't really report because we really only have one commercial harvester reporting landing statewide. That fishery has always been very sporadic and dependent on some novel and unique offshore fisheries that come and go. It's really a boom and bust. So trend wise, there's not much to say on that. Eastern oysters, almost all of this is due to aquaculture. Our wild fishery, as most people know, has really been extirpated statewide with a few small exceptions, namely Wellfleet. But hopefully our restoration program that Bob reported on earlier in the meeting will start throwing off more seed, and hopefully we can restore our wild population and wild fishery in the future for oysters. One thing of note for Eastern oysters is the price per piece has largely been the same for years and years. So as inflation really takes a bite, farmers are struggling because the price they're getting for their great Massachusetts product really isn't increasing. The wild fishery, though, conversely, which are the next several species, the price has increased dramatically, and that's unfortunately largely due to the decline in our wild harvest for most of our wild species. But price has really gone crazy, largely because of that supply and demand equation. Quahogs have declined in landings gradually, as have most of our wild fisheries, but are largely holding their own. But price again has been pretty good for quahogs maintaining that fishery. Razor clams continue to explode across Massachusetts, and what we're really seeing is a shift from the softshell clam fishery to the razor clam fishery. Again, razors are little more adaptable for warm water, so we see their populations increasing a lot. So a lot of our wild softshell fishers have transitioned to razor clam, and it's a super high value species, about $5 a pound. So it's really contributing more and more to our overall industry. Sea scallops, which take place largely in federal waters but are landed in Massachusetts, is by far our largest industry. Everyone's aware of that. In fact, the sea scallop fishery in Massachusetts, again, mostly in federal waters, is the largest shell fishery in the United States. And we're fortunate that it's based here in Massachusetts. But again, the sea scallop fishery has been in decline for years, which has been well reported. And I'd finally like to end on soft clam. It's probably our most imperiled fishery, and we see declines in the wild softshell fishery continuing and quite dramatically just in the last few years. We're down about 1 million pounds, and this has historically been our largest wild fishery, at least in state waters. And again, we've reported that it's a really susceptible fishery to climate change, and obviously with the green crab explosion that we've heard a lot about as its number one predator. It it's been declining. The last big set we got was about 10 years ago, and we're literally still digging off those old large clams. But again, because of the decline, there's still demand for those clams. If you look at the value, it's actually staying the same, and the price that dealers are forced to pay for softshell clams. And for any of you who have eaten a fried clam plate, you've seen the price on the menus just exploding. They're able to still eke out a little bit of a living. We are pleased to report, though, for the first time in 10 years, we are seeing sets of small seed softshell clams up and down the coast. And so we're really pleased to see that. So hopefully this fishery can rebound a little bit. Next slide. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague Alex, who will give us another Vibrio and Campy update. And maybe if folks could hold their questions until the end of the DMF presentation, just I think it'll make it easier with all the different presenters. So with that, I'll turn it over to Alex. Thank you.
Thanks, Wayne. I just have a couple quick slides for you guys, but I wanted to start out by reminding anyone who harvests oysters that the Vibrio control season for oysters begins May 19th, so it's fast approaching. Next slide, please. So I went over this a little bit at the last meeting in some more detail, but I just wanted to quickly talk about the 2025 illnesses now that we have the full picture. DMF investigated 25 single source Vibrio cases last year, which is a significant uptick over previous years. And this included 2 precautionary closures, one in Duxbury, Plymouth, Kingston, and another in Pleasant Bay. In addition to that, we saw 40 total Campylobacter cases associated with shellfish consumption, primarily oyster consumption. This also included 5 outbreaks and 1 closure that covered Menemsha Pond and Katama Bay, both on the vineyard. This is a pretty substantial increase in number of illnesses we've seen. It's gone from almost none, 1 or 2 here or there prior to 2024, to having 1 outbreak in 2024 in Yarmouth, and then now in 2025 having 40 total illnesses and 5 outbreaks. So a pretty significant trend of increasing illnesses. Next slide, please. So I wanted to just mention what that's going to mean for 2026 from DMF standpoint. In particular, birds on floating aquaculture gear add a huge layer of complexity to these Campylobacter outbreaks when we're investigating them. And as a result, when we see significant bird presence with a lack of bird deterrence on floating gear, aquaculture sites are going to be closed this summer until the bird problem can be fixed. It won't be entire embayment closures. It will just be individual sites as we see issues similar to what's seen in this picture. If you guys have heard me talk at all before, I'm pretty concerned about the number of Campylobacter illnesses that we saw last year and the trends that we've been seeing. There's a possibility of equal numbers or more for cases, outbreaks, and closures. And that these closures, I just wanted to note that even though most of the illnesses are related to aquaculturally raised oysters, when we have to initiate a closure while we conduct an investigation, entire embayments are being closed. It's not just the aquaculture sites. So depending on the area, this could impact wild fisheries as well. So that's what's on the horizon for 2026. We'll see. Maybe there'll be a decrease in number of Campylobacter illnesses, but I would expect there to still be significant numbers. And that's all I have. Next slide, I think.
Okay, thanks, Alex. I'm just going to give a quick update on the biotoxin monitoring and management. And mostly, this slide serves just as a reminder. I know you have seen these maps before. We are required by the NSSP, the National Shellfish Sanitation Program, to have a biotoxin monitoring and management plan because we do have phytoplankton organisms that produce toxins and are considered harmful algae. We have 2 methods that we use to approach biotoxin monitoring. We have phytoplankton monitoring, which is year-round. As you know, the phytoplankton are the primary food source for the filter feeding shellfish. The map on the left shows all of our phytoplankton monitoring stations. And we also have some help from some imaging flow cytobots that's run by Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. And so we have one at the Martha's Vineyard Coastal Observatory, and there's usually one in Salt Pond, which is a sort of a hot spot for PSP. And then on the right, we have the map of our mussel PSP monitoring stations. So this is where we're actually using the mouse bioassay to measure toxins in blue mussel, which are our sentinel species for PSP and biotoxins in general, but PSP is the biotoxin that we measure and we monitor for regularly. Next slide, please. So 2025 was a typical, or not an exceptional year for PSP in the North Shore. We see in the red area, that's the area that got closed last year. In the box, we have the Nauset area, and just below it, the Pleasant Bay area. And so the reason we're talking about biotoxin is because I just wanted to point out that the PSP causing the Alexandrian blooms that cause PSP on Cape Cod basically Nauset and Pleasant Bay are becoming more unpredictable. We've had over 22,000 cells per liter in Meeting House Pond last year. I see that bullet is repeated, but this is important because we weren't really seeing toxicity or cells in Meeting House Pond prior to a few years ago when the Nauset system got extremely hot. We had almost 5,000, a score of 5,000 in mussels coming out of Nauset. And to put that into perspective, the regulatory threshold for mandatory closure and market recall is 80 micrograms per 100 grams of shellfish meats. And so that 5,000 score was exceptionally high, along with a very high density bloom that we believe got out of Nauset and seeded some other areas. And one was Pleasant Bay. So we've had PSP closures in Pleasant Bay now for several years, and our colleagues at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution have documented new cyst beds in that system. So it looks like Pleasant Bay has become another Nauset. We had quahogs in Aries Pond that exceeded the regulatory threshold last year in May. So as I mentioned, 80 micrograms per 100 grams is that regulatory threshold, and they were at 295, so significantly above the threshold. As I mentioned, we had that 22,000 cells per liter in December of 2025. And the reason that's noteworthy is because all these years managing PSP blooms on the Cape, it was pretty much a spring bloom. But now we're seeing it start in the fall. We're seeing Thanksgiving blooms. We're seeing Christmas blooms. We recently had a bloom that we were monitoring, and we actually detected toxicity, only 42 micrograms per 100 grams. So that's about halfway to the mandatory closure and recall level. However, that happened in water that was only 46 degrees. The cell counts there were, 378, and anything above 200 cells per liter can produce toxicity in shellfish. But we're talking about moderate cell numbers and very, very low water temperatures. And, quahogs typically, based on our historical experience with the species, hasn't been very quick to pick up toxicity. So this is kind of a surprise to us. So we're considering a more conservative approach to managing those two systems. And basically, we're looking at the two species that are most likely to pick up toxin quickly in cold water, and that would be blue mussel and the soft shell clam. Now, there is not a whole lot of harvest of those two species in those two systems, so we don't anticipate having a big impact on industry and the market by closing those areas from maybe November through June, when we would expect all the blooms to have subsided. But because we can go from non-detect to over the regulatory limit that requires a recall, we're beginning to think we need to have a conditional area management plan where those species are closed during the season that has the highest risk. The major impact we see, other than the few that may be harvesting low numbers of those species, is that a conditional area management to those growing areas means that its classification is going to move from an approved classification to conditionally approved. Now, for all other species, they will not be closed unless there's a bloom that requires closure for everything. But as we mentioned in several other instances, that may have implications for their ability to tap into the European market. And I think I just had one more click to give you a close-up on the Nauset system and the Pleasant Bay system. So we currently have a closure in the Pleasant Bay system in the Namaquoit. Again, as I mentioned, we've already measured toxicity in quahogs in Aries Pond and the Namaquoit. We're currently monitoring the aquaculture sites outside of the pond, outside of that closure. And so far, we have not detected any toxicity in the oysters. And oysters tend to be the slowest to pick up toxin. So we're hoping to avoid an expansion of that closure in Pleasant Bay. And we're continuing to keep an eye on Nauset because this is around the time that bloom starts to kick up and we start to to see a need to have PSP biotoxin closures in Nauset. And I am going to, next slide, and pass it on to, is it Matt? Are you up next? Nope, it's not Matt.
No, Chrissy, it's Jared. Good evening. Good evening. Good afternoon, folks. I'm going to just briefly touch on a recent pilot program that we initiated for this current year. This pilot program stems from a long-standing closure of state waters inside the 3 Mile line between Gloucester and Winthrop, dating back more than 100 years. And its origin was effectively to separate lobster trap gear from mobile gear to prevent user group conflicts, giving the lobster industry kind of year-round access to those inshore waters. And with the whale closures affecting the lobster industry from February to mid-May, we got inquiries from some Gloucester area fishermen who fish for sea scallops during the winter time in adjacent state waters and some and federal waters as well to consider opening some discrete areas within that North Shore closure to sea scallop dredging, because they were aware of some abundances of sea scallops in those areas, and it would provide an opportunity for them to have some near shore fishing during the winter period. We did our due diligence into this, and we spoke with the Bureau of Underwater Archaeology regarding shipwrecks and other archaeological artifacts. We were able to map those, which you'll see in the map to the right, to help avoid hangs on those and avoid interactions with those artifacts, and provide the fisherman with the ability to call in and document the actual location should a hang occur. We also spoke with some recreational divers in the area and developed these pilot program areas kind of seaward of the 90-foot depth contour, where we would expect there to be recreational diving inside of that contour. And then we also have an ongoing pilot program with on-demand lobster trap fishing. And there are some individuals out of Gloucester, Nahant, Marblehead Beverly that are participating in that. And we discussed with them kind of the potential interactions between those two gears and how to avoid that, both through regular communication and some emerging technology that you can get on your cell phone or onto your chart plotter that can show the location of on-demand fishing gear. So we initiated the program this year. We had an application period of January 20th to February 3rd. We qualified 31 participants. The qualification criteria was you had to have a coastal access permit allowing you to tow a sea scallop dredge in state waters. You needed to have prior state waters landings of sea scallops, a clean record, and and we required all vessels to have an operable tracking device. Those are the same tracking devices that are used in the lobster fishery. They're cellular based, and they have a really high ping rate, so that the vessels can be actively monitored so that we can know and they can know if they're inside the exemption area, since the surrounding area remains closed to mobile gear fishing. Next slide. So we had 21 different vessels take at least one trip. So 21 of the 31 qualified boats participated. 184 trips were taken within the pilot program area. There have been about 8 to 10 active vessels participating in this fishery. The first week had a large number of trips and a large number of vessels. There were 87 trips conducted by 21 vessels. That has since tapered off, and it's really become a fishery for the more local boats. There were some boats that were coming up from the Cape and from the South Shore that first week to give it a go. Fishing conditions were okay, but they weren't strong enough for those vessels to continue to, make that transit or relocate for the period of time to target it. It became kind of an area for some local boats. There are about 8 boats taking about 20 to 25 trips a week. We did some rough calculations, and we've concluded that vessels participating in this program have landed about $750,000 worth of scallops through week 5. That may include scallops taken in adjacent open areas or in federal waters. We haven't thoroughly parsed that. That's based on trips by vessel, landings by vessels participating in this program. So that's a rough calculation. The program will continue through this month, but we expect it will wane over the next 2 weeks as the northern Gulf of Maine area just opened today in federal waters, and most of the vessels participating in this fishery will likely go target scallops on the northern part of Stellwagen under that program until that quota is exhausted, which we anticipate will probably be in early mid-April, and then some vessels may come back in and continue to chip away at state waters after that. That's not uncommon. And you'll see in the map kind of where activity has been located in this. Those are some heat maps of where tows have occurred by the participating vessels. So you can see that the southern portion of the northern area of Gloucester was a really hot area in week 1 and kind of dissipated over time and is now, as of week 5, which ran through March 21. There was no fishing. There was limited fishing activity in that area, and fishing activity over time has shifted more towards the southern area, and most of that fishing activity has occurred in kind of the eastern and northern portion of that area. So that's some of the spatial data that we're able to get from those vessel trackers that help us kind of understand where this activity is occurring in space and time. So that's all I have on that. Thank you for your time today.
Any questions for Jared? Oh, nope. Oh, actually, I jumped ahead. I forgot there's one more. So contaminated relays, Matt.
Yep. Thanks, Bob. This will be a very brief update. There'll be plenty of time for questions. So I think I've already reported to this group that last summer, our only harvest vessel, Ocean Rancher, sank at the dock during a bizarre northeast storm. He was able to raise it, got it back up and running, took a few weeks. It's really a monumental effort. I don't know how he did it. But that being said, we fell short by a few thousand bushels of what the orders were from 2025. I'm happy to report that for 2026, he is itching to go. This has been a very busy week for contaminated relay logistics. Monday, I sent off my Taunton River quahog sample to the Kennebec River Bioscience Lab in Maine. They do pathology testing to make sure that we are not spreading diseased critters around the state. I'll have those results next week. As soon as I get that clean bill of health, applications will go out to every constable in the Commonwealth. I spoke to Bruce this week. He put his boat in the water yesterday and moved it to the dock that he works out of for contaminated relay on the river just today. And we have a second vessel that is interested. I've spoken to this captain. He called me this week to let me know he was heading down that way to the Mount Hope Bay region to look for dockage. That's going to be his biggest challenge if he wants to take part in this relay program, finding a spot to dock either where Bruce does or somewhere else on that system that makes it easy for offloading large volumes of quahogs on a daily basis. The good news is he's interested, and we would very much welcome a second vessel so we're not hanging by a thread just relying on one. We have discussed a possible waiver to the spawning season requirement. In fact, we are going back to the spawning season requirement. If you remember, during COVID times, we waived the requirement that relayed quahogs be placed in the ground for an entire spawning season. And that's because we were down to one vessel, and most towns weren't going to get what they needed in time. So now the spawning season is June 15th to September 15th. We're toying with the idea of moving that start back to July 1st. Gives us an extra 2 weeks for folks to get stuff in the ground. And of course, there are some towns that have very small areas that they can work with and only one relay area. If they need a waiver, let's say they get them in the ground on July 2nd. If they make their case to us, we'll certainly listen to it and potentially let them still harvest this fall. That's how most of these towns operate. What we're trying to do is get away from sort of the put and take fishery aspect of this and get as much benefit as we can out of relaying these cohogs to all these different communities. And to that end, there'll be I would guess that by the end of April we will be fishing relay cohogs out of the river. Everything should be in place by then, and we have two towns that passed last year on filling their orders because of the complications with the vessel going down. They will be put at the front of the line, and DMF may get a little bit more involved in the scheduling of whose orders get filled when, to accommodate the towns that have very limited opportunity for relay areas. And we just may ask Bruce to fill certain smaller orders first, so those folks can take advantage of having their stuff in the ground for the whole spawning season. And I think I'll turn it back to Bob, and I think DMF will field questions now.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Great update. Does anyone have questions for Matt or anybody on the DMF team? Renee, the floor is yours.
Hi, it's actually more of an observation because I was very surprised to see on Wayne's graph that the price for cohogs have gone up because I've never seen them as low as they were this year as in the past 20 years. So I'd be very interested to see who got that money.
I don't know if anyone on the Shellfish team has any insight on that at all, but don't
No.
know.
I mean, I can interject quickly, but and say that last year in 2025 was the highest price we paid for cohogs in several years. And now it's, with Virginia coming back because Virginia had their blight and so they were offline, and now that Virginia's back online, it's the lowest we're going to see. This year is going to be, if you saw it low last year, Renee, it's going to be even worse this year.
It's really a shame because they were pretty steady at 32 cents a piece for the last 20 years. And this year, the guys were getting between 25 and 28 cents.
Yeah, well, we're getting offered product well below that right now, coming, second, third hand too. So it's going to be ugly with Virginia coming online.
It's going to make it really difficult for these guys.
Yeah,
to make a
especially
living.
with these too. Yeah.
Hey, any other questions for the DMF team or comments? No? Well, you guys are letting us off the hook easy tonight. We'll take it though. Excuse me. All right. Moving on to other business. Wayne, did you want to chat a little bit about upcoming meeting dates? The next meeting?
Yeah, I'd love to hear some feedback from the group about our cadence. We typically have a spring and a fall meeting and occasionally special meetings. Right now, in terms of issues, we've got a lot going on with work groups, and then we're talking about maybe a third work group with the Section 98 updates. So I don't foresee anything in the immediate future, but I'd love to hear the panel's opinion in terms of a next meeting date, or if, what looking towards a typical fall meeting as our next one.
I mean, I think the cadence seems to work well for us, especially with these subcommittees going on, as well.
Yeah, I would probably say the same. Seems like this is a pretty heavy lift for DMF staff. You guys have a busy summer season coming. So I see pushing to the fall as, from my perspective, seems totally fine.
Anybody else?
So I would say, unless something comes up, we'll probably do our usual early November. Thanks.
Sounds good, Wayne. Thanks. All right. Do any SAP members have any future meeting agenda items that they'd like to add on for the fall meeting? And those are opportunity to kind of if I mean you can always reach out to DMF or Wayne at any time with the things that you want the SAP to consider moving forward. But this is also just a chance right now to put it out there. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering, a while ago we had talked about the status of people using um, machines for culling and counting in wholesale facilities. There was not really a mechanism for returned product under those circumstances, and I was just wondering if we could have an update on that, if that's something that DMF's working on, and what that status is, because I think that's going to be an emerging thing, and it's something we're looking into.
Sure,
That
I'll
sounds
field that one.
go ahead. And it's also, Chrissy, I mean, we can field it now, but we can also add it if we want more substantive for the fall meeting. But go ahead.
Sure. So we have had some meetings on this. We actually, it was something that was discussed not last year, but the year before during our risk assessment, risk management with FDA. And I think what we settled on was off-site culling is not allowed at the dealer facility. However, the dealer can grade. And so the distinction there is you're not allowed to just take your product to a dealer facility and not, for example, have all of the product meet all of the requirements for a legally landed product. So during Vibrio season, it would still need to be iced. It would still need to be, less than 5% seed. So there would still have to be some level of culling done by the harvester. And then we could give a letter of authorization. And I know, Mike Moore, Eric Hickey and I actually had a discussion with a dealer this past week about this very issue. There would have to be an intermediate processing plan by the dealer, and then a special accommodation either via, and Alex, maybe you can, I believe it's done through a permit condition, allowing the dealer to give the product back to the harvester for resubmergence. But we wouldn't go the route where it really is offsite culling. So the FDA didn't have a problem with what he witnessed, because he said, well, this is really just a dealer grading product. The product came in clean. The FDA does not want to see harvesters bringing in a dirty product that's full of mud and shack and everything else. It needs to be pre-culled, but if it's for grading only, it can be allowable.
Okay, and then like the small product just has to be at that 5% or whatever, generally. So that would be okay. Okay. So as far as DMF is concerned, this is already allowed in the regulations. You just have a process to go through now. And we can discuss it in another meeting. We don't have to do this right now.
Yep.
I just wanted to bring it up.
Thanks, Mike. Dale, go ahead.
So I hate to sound like a broken record, but I am still getting pinged by a number of people to continue the discussion about bulk tagging. So I would like to see that come back onto the agenda so that we can continue that discussion.
Okay. Thanks, Dale. Steve.
Yeah, thanks. One thing that I'd like to see surface is, or sort of an offer to support any permit and or particularly in light of DMF's investment and commitment around habitat restoration, and there are a lot of ongoing restoration permit streamlining efforts and different habitat types. I think that's an important topic for this group, for someone like me looking to advance habitat restoration, but also, Mike referencing mulching. I think an update around permit, particularly around restoration, would be helpful, and perhaps an update, I think, related to your guys' discussion around updating the shellfish planting guidelines. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Stephen. I'm hopeful that by our November meeting, we may be able to report back to you. And then, so I'll circle up with my colleagues at DEP. As I said, we're working on that right now. We're in discussions about that. And hopefully by November, we'll be in a position to be able to report back to this group on where we stand with that. And we can also address our shellfish planting guidelines at the same time then. So happy to do that. Anything else? Okay, very good. So I'm going to turn it over. Whoops, Seth, go ahead. It looks like, where's Seth? Guess that was okay. Hand went down. All right, so I'm going to take public comment right now. So if you're in the queue, excuse me, if you raise your hand, we can unmute you and have you speak. Excuse me. Any public comment? Joseph Gothier.
Hey guys, thank you for taking me. I just wanted a follow-up question on the off-site or dealer grading. Chris, you mentioned that we should have an intermediate process plan that we can submit for approval. Could you just give me some further guidance to who we should be submitting that to?
So that is something that is entirely in DPH's arena, and so those would be conversations with Eric Hickey and Mike Moore's group. But because of the fact that it's not just off-site culling, this is product that officially has gone through the primary transaction with the dealer. Once it's, especially during Vibrio season, once it's come down to temperature, you have to have limitations on how long it's out, outside of refrigeration. So that really is a conversation with DPH, but that's what the conversation is about, allowing it, now with at least one dealer and potentially, well, two dealers and potentially others, is that they have their plan and that they vet it through DPH. I don't know if Mike Moore wants to comment or just kind of leave it alone, but it's something that you'll have to discuss with your DPH inspectors.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, yeah, I'd have to defer to Eric on that. Sorry.
Hi, sorry to jump in. Seth Garfield.
Go for it, Seth.
Too many buttons on my phone. I'm just hoping we keep up with, now that the ISSC meeting is being pushed off, so much further, that between the discussion we had the other day down in New Bedford with the governor and looking for, the funds and the staffing, that all of that work towards addressing some of the concerns of the CSOs and all of that continues, not necessarily, but, an update for the meeting for the fall, because obviously that's still a significant issue for us. And the other interesting thing, it's never really talked about, but the value of the recreational fishing, which is closed down due to the CSO closures. I just think that, there's no real voice there. I know the Shellfish Warden Association is kind of looking at that, especially in regards to the permits they sell and the value of the shellfish brought in. But that could be something that maybe is reviewed or monitored over the year because of the CSO closures. Thanks.
Yep, thanks, Seth. We're happy to add that in and advance that discussion at the next meeting. Any other comments, public or otherwise? All right, looks like we're gonna finish a little ahead of schedule. Very good. Well, thank you all very much. Excellent meeting. Thanks for all the updates. and continued work. So I guess at this point, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So
I move
moved.
to
Do I have a second?
second.
And do I have any objections to adjourning the meeting? Okay, not seeing any. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Take care.
Thanks, folks.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.